Hello and welcome to the third episode of Discussions and Dragons. This is the podcast where we discuss Dungeons and Dragons. I'm your host, Resident Player Character, and I'm with our resident Dungeon Master once again. Today's episode is about the playable classes of the game. But first, how are you doing today, Resident Dungeon Master?
I'm doing well, player character. How about yourself?
I'm doing just fine. So, since today's episode is about the classes of the game, we already covered the races of the game and the spell casting whole mamma jamma there in the last two episodes of this podcast. So
Indeed.
we're gonna go We're gonna go deeper in today about the playable classes of Dungeons and Dragons, the main 12 to be exact.
Awesome.
And our first class, we're gonna go alphabetically just because it's organized. Our first class is Barbarian. So
Right.
Barbarians are described as fierce warriors of primitive background who can enter a battle rage.
Indeed, the barbarians are the tanks, if you will, of the party. They are going to take the brunt of the damage.
And the brunt of the damage is usually something to be taken, and Barbarians do it very well. They are needed as... They are kind of like... And we'll talk about Paladins and Clerics in a bit, but they're kind of like one of those classes that you need to take damage, because other classes just can't. They're too frail.
Barbarians are very good for taking damage, specifically because they have an ability called Rage.
Tell me about what Rage is.
When a barbarian activates their Rage ability for the duration, however long it may last, there are some specifics, but I won't get too into it, they simply take half damage from piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing attacks, which basically means like swords, maces, just simple weapons.
Yeah.
And this allows them to take large amounts of damage and just continue to get beaten down. And then when your Dungeon Master says you take this amount of damage, you say, okay, I'm going to have that. And then you'll be able to take more hits.
And if you're playing a Barbarian, you should expect to get hit or be going out looking to get hit.
Yeah, barbarians are just... That's a good way to play them.
Yeah, don't ever be, don't stray away from a fight because you're probably going to come out on top.
Yeah, in fact, the barbarian might even be looking for a fight.
Yeah. And there are, in the very early days of D&D, there are class race restrictions. I don't think that's the case anymore, right?
No, D&D 5th edition does not restrict classes to be played by certain races anymore. Back
in the day,
yeah.
You could only be an orc, I think.
Something
like that?
Orc. Yes.
Yeah.
It was a lot more... 5th edition's a lot more streamlined for customization.
How long has it been since 1st edition?
Oh, goodness. 40 years?
Yeah.
50?
Long time coming, so I think it was a good decision to relieve those restrictions. So
Yeah.
Barbarians are kind of just that big, beefy person you need in your party just to take hits.
They rely on strength, yeah.
And constitution. So
Yes.
they're usually the healthiest, most well-bodied or able-bodied person in your party. They might also focus on intimidation. Just
They
based on their
aren't-
size alone.
Yeah, they aren't casters at all. These guys or gals rely on hand-to-hand combat.
Yes, or weapon to hand or weapon to weapon, or really anything to anything as long as it involves combat.
And rage. Lots
Yeah.
of rage.
If you got a little anger to get out, play Barbarian.
You can imagine just last example from me, just someone who is simple-minded. They got a one-track mind. They live for the simple things in life, like a good fist fight and a cold drink, like a soda or something, maybe a sarsaparilla.
And something interesting to note is that I was referring to Barbarians as the big burly people in your party. They can be any race.
Oh yeah, you could have a halfling barbarian, a small 2 or 3 foot person that just.
Yeah. You can have a Dragonborn Barbarian, which is even more terrifying than a regular Barbarian, of a human or orc variety per se.
Imagine someone charging at you wearing hardly any clothes, draped over themselves, just using their natural muscle as armor, who also can breathe fire. That's terrifying.
Most people, when they think of barbarians, they think of cavemen wearing loincloths, and that's essentially pretty much exactly what it is in this game most of the time.
But
You
yeah,
just have some hulking, brutish, and not even just of relative size. You can have a hulking 3-foot halfling just like this ripped person.
That's,
Barbarians are very fun to play, but I don't know how
that's,
practical they are in a lot of situations that involve
that's about it.
wisdom or intelligence.
Yeah. I have played a barbarian before. I just tried to keep it simple, and it worked out great for me. I had a lot of fun.
I have not played a barbarian, but I kind of want to now. Our second class is one I'm very excited about. It is the Bard, an inspiring
boy.
musician whose power echoes through the music of creation, figuratively and literally. Tell me a little bit about bards.
Bards are very charismatic, relying on the charisma stat. They are most known for their ability to cast spells through music. They use, flutes, lutes, harps, or harpsichords, just small instruments to produce sounds and music. And they use this to cast their spells. And you can customize this however much you want, but bards are really a good support for the party. They have a lot of utility for giving some people what's called bardic inspiration. A bardic inspiration essentially gives someone mechanically it gives you higher rolls, but roleplay wise, it's just you are feeling inspired by your teammate who's like encouraging you to battle on or get through whatever you're trying to do, or maybe they help you out with getting an idea or achieving a certain task.
I am currently playing a bard. The first game that I've played with him legitimately and happened last night with our new campaign group, and it was fun. To say the least.
Side note, we player character and I, Dungeon Master, have started a new campaign. We are playing the Curse of Strahd module. We might talk about that later in a future podcast, but as of now, we've just started. I am playing the role of the DM, and player character is playing a Kenku Bard. And
we talked about Kenku in our Races episode, I believe, briefly.
And it is a very detailed, in-depth, and interesting character overall. But enough about that. Back to bards.
Well, what I was going to say about bards is that bards focus on the power of music or song to cast their spells. Kenku can only mimic things they have heard. They cannot actually talk. So it's an extra challenge.
They don't have their own voice, yeah.
Yeah, they got cursed. Long story. We'll talk about it later. But, for that kind of bard, it's a very interesting player combination, such as the Halfling Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
Like a barbarian that's 2 feet tall, a bard that can't sing themselves.
Yeah.
So get creative with it. There's a lot of freedom, and I think that's part of the reason they took away the class restriction.
Yeah, shake it up. Shake it up. I love that. As a DM, I love that 100% when somebody brings forward something new and interesting, and I can say, hey, that's a really good idea. Let's roll with it. A spellcaster that usually would speak words to cast spells, who can't speak, we did some modifications to it, and it works out in our campaign, and I love it.
So bards throughout fantasy history and fantasy novels, fantasy film, they are usually seen with their quintessential lute, as an LUTE, the little guitar musical instrument from medieval times, and they're always seen as jovial or jolly people. And I find that interesting because bards can actually be very, very threatening with their magic.
Or sinister.
Yeah, like
There's a lot of different ways.
Like very aggressive and mean all the time, but they can be very like noble, toned down beings. And bards can seem jovial and happy on the outside, but they can be plotting against you right in front of your eyes.
Now, bards have another ability called Song of Rest, essentially doing a little bit of healing to some of their allies, which still makes them a good support. But there are other classes that are a lot better at healing.
Oh yeah, and one of those classes would happen to be the Cleric.
Which is next up on our list.
A Cleric is a priestly champion who wields divine magic in service of a higher power.
Clerics base their spells and their entire character on the Wisdom stat.
Yes.
So Wisdom stats in D&D essentially don't necessarily mean what you think about in the real world. We can go over like the mechanics and whatnot of building a player character and later, maybe in a future episode. just something to think about. But essentially, wisdom is kind of like your street smarts, I'd say. This would
It's
be
how well you
your
can decipher a situation.
your
Social situation,
perception,
most of the
your nature, your what's another one for wisdom? Uh, let's see.
Wisdom is kind of just like the overall stat. Wisdom's like the hardest to explain.
It really is.
It's next to intelligence and charisma, because those are like your mind stats. Intelligence, of course, is like how smart you are as a character, how
Okay.
like
I
capable
got
you
it.
are of thinking.
The intelligence is your level of smartness in a single instance. Wisdom is your level of smartness that you've gained from being in a lot of other instances.
So if you have like maybe a younger human character versus an older dwarven character, chances are that dwarf is going to have higher wisdom naturally than that human,
Exactly.
just from age alone.
So yes, but clerics, they have all this information that they have to learn, and they belong to a tradition or a faith, and they have a god or goddess, whatever have you for your cleric, that they a deity
And
that
just reminding everyone this is made up. It's a game.
yes,
So
yeah, all in good fun, all in role play,
Yeah.
and just for the sake of having fun with friends.
some of those
But
deities are nuts, though.
there's
Pretty
for
cool.
cleric, some of them are angels, some of them are just simply gods, some of them are demigods. You could, as a cleric, you could have a unicorn be your deity. It's just so much stuff. But overall, clerics are excellent healers, and very good spellcasters
the best.
when fighting. Clerics, you usually, when you go into a board game or video game, you don't want to be the healer. You kind of feel like you're taking care of everybody. And Wizards of the Coast kind of got the idea, Wizards of the Coast, who make the D&D products and retail them, said, hey, nobody really likes playing a cleric. Let's just buff up this class so much that it would be kind of dumb not to have a cleric. So clerics can output pretty good damage, excellent healing, and they're amazing against undead creatures like skeletons and zombies. It's just
Which is a huge buff in a game that revolves almost entirely around undead creatures sometimes.
Curse of Strahd.
He's been dropping me hints for like weeks.
He still hasn't got him. Don't tell him.
None.
But yes, clerics are absolutely nuts if you know how to play it. And the roleplay can get even better, because you can create some awkward social tension between some of your characters for like some moral situations. And we've
got
had
a cleric or a paladin and a warlock in the same party, chances are they're gonna have some kind of existential argument at some point.
chances. You roll the dice on that one.
The chances are, in fact, 100.
One out of
I've
one.
always found really interesting. Like I don't think I've ever played one, but I think playing it, and there are subclasses, could be a whole other episode, but there are some subclasses who are pretty much the opposite of your class.
Ooh.
You know?
Subclasses are just a way to hone your abilities in your certain class and really bear down on a character customization to make you feel like this is your special character that you made, this is your idea.
One of the ones I remember for cleric is Grave Domain, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, so that's healing magic based around like necromancy.
Necromancy? Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a necromancy is a wizard thing. So some subclasses dip into others, but yeah, like you said, that's a whole nother ballgame. But just clerics, wise, healers, good against undead.
Usually dwarves.
Usually dwarves. That's that would be the trope. A dwarven cleric.
Yeah, pretty much. That's the picture that we've found in all the books. The next class, talk about tropes, the next class is Druid.
Druids are...
They are a priest of the old faith, wielding the powers of nature and adopting animal forms. Everyone knows what a druid is. They turn into, like, the horses and dogs or whatever.
Druids are people... Yeah.
What?
Druids are the people who say, I would like to be this race, but I would also like to be a bear or a cat or
Yes.
a bird.
I remember one of the notable things I turned into with my druid was a giant owl.
Yes, flight form.
Pretty cool.
But
I played a dwarven druid, which is not common, I've heard.
similarly to clerics, druids base all of their abilities on wisdom as well. So
They
They
focus
are-
on intelligence, wisdom, while clerics focus on wisdom and charisma, which makes sense because druids usually aren't that charismatic.
druids, just for their spells, their spellcasting modifier is wisdom, and for that terminology, you can go back to our second episode about spellcasting.
Yes.
But clerics and wisdom base all of their spells around, or clerics and druids base all their spells around wisdom. And with druids, it's a different type of wisdom, but still follows the same stat. So this is what I was trying to say earlier with how ability scores or just abilities can be different from what you think they are, like the actual definition we use.
Mhm.
But in D&D, it can be something different. It can mean two things in D&D for one ability score.
Yes.
But yeah, druids can be there's a broad range of how you can play a druid, just like any class, but some of the subclasses for druid base themselves around the shapeshifting, and some base themselves around the spellcasting, and some just base themselves around being a hippie, being one with nature. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say they base them around just nature.
If
One
you
is
could
based
imagine,
entirely around the moon.
if you could imagine a barbarian who's a spellcaster, that's a druid.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
That's
what a barbarian wants to do is turn into a bear. Druids can do that.
a druid can turn into a bear that envies the barbarian's rage.
Yeah. It's if you want to constantly not be whatever race you picked, play a druid. Because
But they can also
their
do-
signature ability is wild shape, which
And
they
they
get at
also
level
have 2.
level 1 druid, level 2 druid.
Level 2? Yeah, I believe it's level 2.
Yeah, because level 1 means you're basically starting off with your magical power, like you just got it
Mm-hmm.
most of the time, depending on the context of the campaign. But with druidic magic, wild shape is your best friend. I've found out through playing a druid.
Mm.
It helps you, and I think you have charges per day of that. Last time I checked, 2.
Wild shape, yes, it is. You only have a certain amount per day, but as you level up, obviously you get more. And even with a subclass that bases around your wild shape, you get a ton of different stuff. And wild shapes aren't even your specific thing. Like we were saying with subclasses, some of them base around spells, and some of the spells you can be like an elemental druid, or like a healing druid, or like just a straight damage output druid, or you can be a wild shape druid. It's lots of stuff.
Druid is one of the most versatile and
Utility class.
classes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And something funny that I want to talk about is we played, me, Resident Dungeon Master, and a couple of other friends played a campaign last year that lasted a couple sessions.
Around this time.
Huh?
Around this time of year, yeah.
Yeah, it was about a year ago. And I played a race called a Shifter, and the races really don't matter. I think I was playing a Warlock, and Resident Dungeon Master was playing a Druid, and you were Circle of Spores?
Circle of Spores. Yeah, I revolved my magic around fungi and sort of like a necromancy kind of, like a druid, somewhat edgy, but also very like nice and believing in the circle of life. That's how I was role playing that character.
And your character, we were stuck in jail for something at the beginning of this campaign. That's how the DM started it, and we had to get out. And we woke up. We were all like unconscious because we got thrown in there at different times, and we all just woke up and we're like, "Who are you? Who are you?" And I turned to his character, and I was like, "What? Who are you?" He was like, "I'm a druid," and I was like, "Really? How?" And
Would you like me to
something like that? Yeah.
I said, squirrel, unsquirrel, swirl, unsquirrel. I shapeshift. I used all of my charges of shapeshift, which could have helped me greatly in the future.
Yeah.
On just a simple social interaction for the giggles of the party, and then
really
I was out. And so I turned into a squirrel who could get out of the bars of the cave. Exactly. And I only realized that after I had done it, and I looked at the dungeon master and I went, I just wasted that completely, did I? And he said, yes. Yes, you did.
That was.
So,
I think. Didn't we have a barbarian with us and ended up just pulling the bars apart?
Yeah. So
Or I think he like failed at it, and then I did it or something with my claws.
it was
Was
funny. But yes, shapeshifting is awesome. But I'll tell you what, if you don't care a lot about spellcasting or like magical stuff, this next class might be for you.
Yeah, if you straight up just want to fight, maybe the fighter's for you. Fighters are a master of martial combat, skilled with a variety of weapons and armor.
Fighters are soldiers, or they are brawlers, or they are the I'm starting a role play video game. The simplest thing you can do if you're new to D&D, simplest thing you can do is play a human fighter.
Mm-hmm.
It is a trope, but
It's
it works.
the vanilla of D&D.
You get armor,
classes.
you get a sword and a shield, and you just go in. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
I am seeking revenge. Yeah, but still, if you are an experienced player and you play a fighter, there are a ton of ways you can do it, and it is just. In fact, I had a character concept for a fighter that doesn't use weapons. He just settles fights with his fists.
Yeah, you were telling me about that a couple of days ago.
He settles fights with his fists, and he uses the subclass Battle Master and the feat Tavern Brawler, and you look up the specifics of that. But essentially, I wouldn't use honed weapons like long swords or short swords or daggers or hammers. I would pick up a broken glass bottle or a table leg and use that as my weapon.
Mm-hmm.
That's what my fighter did. He got into fights in taverns, and that's where he got his fighter training from. And that's the concept I rolled with, just for creating this fake made-up character that I might not use in the future. But it was just a silly idea, and I went along with it because I knew how to build a fighter, but I wanted to do like a twist on it.
Fighters' main stats are strength and constitution, which makes perfect sense for what they get themselves into.
Yeah,
if you get punched in the face, you want to be able to take it.
It would be the barbarian, but they wear armor and they don't get the rage ability. They get something called Action Surge, which lets them take another action on their turn, which is incredibly powerful in D&D because having 2 actions on 1 turn is just, you can make an extra attack, you could help somebody else out, just tons of stuff. But they can only do that once every short or long rest, I believe, yes. And it's just a very good, overall well-balanced character, the fighter.
I have yet to play one, but if I'm ever at a loss for character ideas, I might challenge myself and see what I can make with a fighter.
I will say the only class I have not ever played in an actual campaign is a bard, a ranger, which we've gotten to, which we'll get to later, and a just bard and ranger.
Gotta get to it then. Play a bard ranger, singing arrows.
Oh!
Boom, idea free. Everyone, do it.
Boom idea. All right, but yes, so fighters not magical at all. They settle things with a sword and shield.
Yeah, they're
but
I know we keep calling them default, right?
They're simple, but they're effective.
Yeah. What were you gonna
say? Let's say you want to play a character, and you don't want to take my idea is a fighter who doesn't use weapons, and you just want to use your fists, and you would use martial arts. Well, this next class might just be for you.
Oh yeah, if you want to be a literal monk, then you might want to play monk. They are a master of martial arts, harnessing the power of the body in pursuit of physical and spiritual perfection. They are
monks.
The archetype of monks in real life.
Imagine.
They got some magic, right?
Imagine Master Shifu or Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda.
Oh yeah, good example. Everyone from Kung Fu Panda.
Everyone from Kung Fu Panda.
Even the movie Kung Fu Panda, that's what monks are.
They're all monks, all of them, even Tai Lung.
Mm-hmm.
But monks base themselves on their movements and their martial arts. It's literally you're a kung fu master.
It's like if you fast forwarded a fighter.
But
that's exactly it.
You went so fast. You're like, I don't need all this armor and these like weapons. I'm just gonna like karate chop him.
You'll very rarely see a monk wearing any kind of heavy armor. Usually they're just wearing leathers or their clothes.
Not even leathers. They have a special ability where they don't need to wear armor for their defense.
I still think that's incredibly overpowered and dumb, but you know, to each their own.
Now, something we will get to in a later episode talking about armor class. Essentially, armor and D&D in 5th edition, just a quick summary, is your armor class is the number to which somebody has to roll with their attack modifier to hit you, to land a blow, whether it's a fist, a weapon, a spell, doesn't matter. If you need to make an attack roll on somebody, you look at the armor class.
Mm-hmm.
Armor class in D&D 5th edition is based around dexterity, which either means you have to be wearing armor, or you have to have a dexterity high enough that you would be able to dodge. So when I think of monks versus, let's say, a fully geared fighter, the fighter in full plate mail, their armor class, or AC, is going to revolve around, can the attacker get through their armor, while a monk, since they don't wear armor, the monks are very nimble and good at dodging. So they could simply like duck or bob and weave around the weapon. That's where their armor class comes from. That's why they have such a high dexterity.
If you've ever seen old Bruce Lee movies, it's essentially how Bruce Lee moves, where he usually redirects hits instead of taking them, or
but
dodges them completely.
It wouldn't make sense for Bruce Lee to don 70 or 80 pounds of armor.
Yeah.
He can just use his swift movements to dodge out of the way of the attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, interesting monk story. I was playing in a campaign just before this one we started, where we had a monk who got a magical item that allowed her to run along the walls as if she were a spider, or Spider-Man.
That's terrifying.
She ran up the walls and faced this giant insect creature and used one blow to stun this gigantic creature for 6 or 7 seconds in our battle. Just enough to get the insect to stop attacking us so we could finish the fight. And it was amazing because if you can just imagine the role play, we're locked in combat with some of these insects with blades for arms, and my barbarian bellows trying to slash through, getting to out of the dungeon, and this giant insect burrows in the ground, comes out of the wall. This tiny little monk, it's a dwarven monk, by the way, so short, tiny little monk, just running across the wall, runs up, stuns this creature.
Your druid's just squirreling and unsquirreling in the corner.
With tears streaming down the face. Oh man, but it was like, monks can be amazing for combat, and they're really built for combat.
They need to nerf them so much.
You're only saying that because of the way you've seen them be played.
Yeah.
But
everyone who's playing this game for the first time, either if you're listening to us and wanting to play it, or you have gotten into it recently, you will have your assumptions about every class or race. They change per person playing them.
You can have 2 people play the same class, and they will play them vastly differently.
Mm-hmm.
And
it would make a really interesting campaign idea would be everyone playing the same class but a different subclass. That sounds like that's a mess. Don't give you any ideas of what you're gonna say.
Write that down. Interesting one-shot idea, but I digress. Yeah, monks based around movement, high dexterity, some wisdom in case if you go into some of their subclasses, you might learn spells, you might not.
They're very spiritual, so wisdom makes sense.
But yes, monks focus on their unarmed strikes. They use their fists to settle combat.
But in a different way from a fighter.
Oh, very different. Fighters hit hard and slow. Monks hit hard and fast.
Speaking of, our next class probably hits almost the hardest out of every one of these, except for Barbarian.
And this is my favorite.
Yes.
This is my favorite class. It is the first class I ever played in D&D. It was the first class I ever played in D&D first edition, back when I was a kid. With my father teaching me how to play D&D. It was the first class I played in D&D 5th edition when I got back into D&D, so it's the class I have the most history with and I have the most knowledge on. This class is the Paladin.
Yes, Paladins are holy warriors bound to a sacred oath. Somewhat like clerics, but more, like, fighty.
If you combine a fighter and if you combine a fighter and a cleric, you've got a Paladin.
Or depending on how you play your Paladin, if you combine a Barbarian and a cleric, you have your Paladin.
Or
Paladins can be very intimidating.
Or if you combined a Warlock and a fighter.
Yeah.
Because some Paladins, you think of the general Paladin, They have their deity. They are very
They have
holy
their oath.
people. Exactly.
What happened
Now-
if they broke that oath?
You would become an Oathbreaker paladin,
Uh-huh.
which have a
Yes.
very, very different role play. Yeah, it is a subclass, one that I was almost going to play in as a paladin. But anyway, yeah, paladins focus their attacks based on their strength and their charisma.
Mhm.
Charisma coming from either their intimidation or their just persuasion, maybe even their political discourse in the campaign, just being from, maybe they're a knight coming from a noble background, and maybe they're part of a king's guard, but they are
Spreading the
fearsome
message
warriors.
of the ruler of the land.
Now, paladins are a good combination of melee fighters and casters because they have a unique ability called smiting. Paladins have their divine smite and some spells that they can enchant their weapon with to do different types of smite, such as the branding smite, which does fire damage, or the thunderous smite, which does lightning damage and creates a loud thunderous boom on impact. It's just it's so fun to play.
If you want to be a barbarian wearing full plate armor and quelling evil in the name of your holy deity, play Paladin.
They are also excellent against undead, might I add.
Yeah, they're essentially beefy clerics.
Oh, and there's one last thing that makes me love Paladin so much.
What's that?
You know when you're playing in a video game or a D&D game and you're just, oh man, you're running low on health and
Yeah, I
the
know the
healer's
situation.
focused on... Okay, well,
I'm always full
the
health
heal...
because I avoid combat.
You also avoid roleplay.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. In fact, player character right here is one of the most roleplay heavy players I have in my session as of right now.
Why?
But I digress again. Paladins have an
You're the best
ability
DM in our
called...
session. Sorry.
Paladins have the ability Lay on Hands,
Oh
which
gosh.
essentially they have a pool of energy that they can draw from at any time to just basically heal themselves up to full.
Yeah.
And in one turn, you can go from on the verge of death to right back where you started.
If you've ever played Pokemon and the gym leader used a full heal or a full restore,
And
that's
you're like,
what
"Oh!"
Paladin using land hands is. Yeah, right before you're about to kill them, it's like, nope.
And you finally got them all like beaten all the way down. They said they gritted their teeth, they grabbed the hilt of their sword off the ground, wiped the blood and sweat off their brow, their hand glowing. They place it upon their chest, and all of their wounds are gone. And you're like, oh crap! Here we go, round 2. That's a paladin.
Yeah, they are very interesting to watch be played, as well as play them.
It's an event in itself.
Oh yeah.
But let's say you don't want to be a melee fighter or do too much casting.
Mm-hmm. Let's say your favorite superhero is Hawkeye.
Let's say, or Green Arrow.
Oh yeah.
Player character. Introduce our next class.
Our next class is Ranger. I thought you were gonna do it. So... What? Do you not like Rangers?
I don't like Rangers.
We can throw up noises. Alright, so a Ranger is a warrior who combats threats on the edges of civilization. Now that's not entirely accurate towards how you can play a Ranger. This is just the main...
For every class in D&D, you can play it in any way you want. It's just really up to you and your play group. But traditionally, Rangers are the barbarians that are more civilized and
Oh, yeah.
use a bow and arrow.
Mm-hmm. Or any ranged weapon.
Oh yeah, any ranged weapon. They're basically...
You can have a
If- if
slingshot
you-
if you want.
If you could combine a rogue and a barbarian, that would be Ranger.
Oh yeah. And Rogue is next, we'll get to that.
But Rangers are definitely outdoor based. They're good at tracking things. They're definitely good at melee fighting. They don't use a lot of spells, but they use some just to aid in their tracking or their stealth, just their outdoor abilities. This is a superpowered Boy Scout.
That's a great way to describe it. We talked about the archetypes of what races usually go with each character, or each class. You have like Dwarven Clerics, you have Human Fighters. Elven Rangers are probably the first or second most played thing in D&D, if I had to take a guess.
Legolas. This
Yeah.
is Legolas.
from I keep
Lord of
forgetting
the
it's
Rings.
from Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that franchise.
Yeah.
So
That
they
one, nobody knows about
are
that one.
they base their attacks and their skills on their dexterity,
Mhm.
but you also would want to put some of your abilities in wisdom based maybe for your subclass or your spells, because if
Yes.
you have a ranger that casts spells, wisdom would be your spell casting modifier for that subclass.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you want to go even more into the city. You want to go into the slums, right? You want to go where there's back alley deals and backstabs, and you want to go where the mercenaries
Treachery
and
and treason.
you want to go into the sleaziest part of town
People
where
breaking rules.
you want to go to the underground. Well, you want to talk to the mercenaries
Sneak in.
guild. You want to hire an assassin to put a hit on
Mhm.
a target in a game. The rogue is who you need to talk to.
I was about to be like wizard.
The barbarian.
Yeah, rogues. I know I announced them early, but they come out of nowhere every time they enter a room. They could just be in there before you, and you wouldn't notice until they reveal themselves. Rogues are scoundrels who use stealth and trickery to overcome obstacles and enemies.
They could be walking behind you. You turn around to have a conversation. They're already a mile ahead of you. Like, come on!
If you roll good enough, a rogue could be riding you, like on your back, and you wouldn't notice.
Oh man.
I've played a rogue, I believe.
You can just guess the traditional way to play a rogue. It's
Sneaky and stabby.
sneaky and stabby. That's really it. You are good at stealing. You are good at tricking people. There are some subclasses that even let you start to cast spells and illusions and
We'll talk
whatnot.
about Arcane Trickster in a minute.
Ugh, I really want to play one. There are subclasses that let you become a master thief or a mastermind or an assassin. Like the rogue is specifically built on being quiet, being sneaky, and then having this one big hit at the beginning of combat, or just setting themselves up in the perfect setting so they can just unload lots of damage.
They usually take something out in one hit or get the last hit on whatever they're trying to take out.
Definitely, and they work so seamlessly well with others.
You need to be fast, like as a person, really quick thinking to play a rogue. Because if you miss your opportunity is gone.
Rogues are also all about positioning.
Oh yeah.
Where a barbarian just runs in, a rogue calculates where they need to be.
A rogue is positioning themselves while the barbarian is roaring and get everybody's attention.
Yeah.
They are usually never the first seen, but they're always the first to leave.
They always get the last laugh.
Yeah, if they're good. I didn't play rogue that well. I'm not really quick enough. That's why I'm stuck with bard. Bards make friends with everybody. Rogues make friends with nobody.
Rogues
They're
make
kind of
friends
polar
with,
opposites.
with themselves.
Yeah.
Just watch your coin purses.
Oh yeah, they're usually a one-man army.
And now rogues can have some cunning and guile. You know, they can definitely implement themselves very well in a social conversation or just a social setting to befriend a party. And let's say somebody's role-playing a rogue, there's probably a good reason you have a rogue on your party of this type of urchin to help you out. I did have another character concept of a rogue who took the subclass Swashbuckler. Essentially, they're a pirate, and they fancy themselves on mastering the one-on-one fighting. Oh my goodness. It was so good just to look at all the stats and whatnot.
Rogues have very good stats.
Rogues are a dex-based character, and dexterity is an amazing stat to have a high number in D&D. So when you have a class that's based solely around dexterity for all of your stuff, it's just so good.
You want to talk about Arcane Trickster?
Arcane Trickster, if you can imagine a rogue that doesn't need anybody else to maximize their damage output or their utility, Arcane Trickster is the thing to go to. They can cast...
like a wizard and a rogue combined.
Oh goodness, it's so good. You can cast these illusions to like trick your enemies into thinking they have different terrain around them, or they're talking to like an image of yourself, or
imagine if anybody saw the latest Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man Far From Home.
Mm-hmm.
Mysterio would be like somewhat of an arcane trickster, just illusions everywhere, but he's like really there, but he's really not, and you don't know if it's him or not.
Exactly. Because imagine a rogue by themselves is dangerous, but if you think you know where a rogue is, that's probably the rogue letting you think you know where the rogue is.
Rogues have the minds of wizards without the magic.
And if you don't want to play a rogue, you don't want to play all these other classes, you just want to hurl spells and deal damage and have some tragic bloodline backstory or weird way.
Howdy, these last 3 classes are for you.
Slaps sorcerer, warlock, and wizard.
Don't
By
say
golly.
names out loud. So yeah, those are our last 3. The first one being sorcerer. Now I have a little quote about sorcerers that I said that you can pull up if you want, if you don't remember.
I believe it is along the lines of sorcerers are just wizards with a little bit more hit points and a little less ugly.
Sorcerers are spellcasters who draw an inherent magic from a gift or bloodline, and their saves are Constitution and Charisma. So they have a little more health, and they're a little less ugly than wizards are. That's why I said that. I don't like sorcerers, but let's talk about them.
Sorcerers base their abilities on their charisma, which is the ability to score charisma. They are a caster. Generally they like being out of the way of things, but they have a lot of very, very powerful attacks.
They would be like the illusionist, right?
I would associate that more with wizard.
Yeah. I don't know why I said that.
Sorcerers are more of like, oh, fire and brimstone, I got you.
Just an explosion.
Like lightning bolts, fireballs, blizzards, just all sorts of stuff. It is sorcerers.
All you can eat magic buffet.
People joke about wizards being glass cannons. Sorcerers would really be the quintessential glass cannon because of just they're built for dealing magic damage.
Also, for anyone who's unfamiliar with that reference, a glass cannon is it means it literally, like if a glass cannon shot a cannonball and it would shatter. They have very low health but very high damage.
Mm-hmm. And they are built for some decent role play. Let's say if you were like, they're definitely built for social role play. Not really great at investigating or anything, but they're good at lying or deceiving or persuading somebody with their guile. Maybe their good looks. Maybe they're very intimidating and they're horrifying to look at. Charisma can do a lot of things for a D&D campaign.
Oh yeah. All of these stats are equally useful, so don't think that, like, they're very finely tuned to be equally useful in a lot of situations involving like fantasy roleplay.
Constitution is the only class, or no, sorry, I misspoke. The only ability that doesn't have a class based around it, because Constitution is literally just your hit points. It just tells you
it's
how
like
many
how
hit
alive
points
are you.
Exactly. Everything else you can build a class around strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. So much stuff.
And if you want to build a class around wisdom and charisma rather than the constitution and charisma, you might want to build a warlock.
Yes.
Warlocks are wielders of magic that is derived from a bargain with an extraplanar entity. They are kind of the polar opposite of paladins and or clerics in a campaign.
Warlocks are the edgy sorcerers.
Yeah. Sorcerers are already edgy enough, but warlocks take it over the edge.
They have an evil patron that they get all their magic powers from, if you will. A sugar daddy.
Yeah.
And they have to do tasks or sell their soul, and remember this is all roleplay for a board game.
Yep.
They sell their souls for a devil or a being of immense power.
Or the Raven Queen.
You hush. You hush, player character.
You guys can go figure this out for yourselves, but yeah, Raven Queen, look it up.
And they gain their magical powers through giving something of themselves up. And they usually are in a desperate situation to become a warlock, but they gain some fantastic powers, especially the cantrip Eldritch Blast. Eldritch Blast is a cantrip that can only be cast by warlock. It's basically it is the sniper of spell attacks of
Mhm.
a cantrips because it has a range of 120 feet and it deals a good amount of damage as a cantrip.
I played a warlock once. That was by far the most fun I've had playing a character in terms of combat. Eldritch Blast is a cantrip, therefore you can cast it as many times as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Not in succession, but like you don't have spell slots for it, so you could just keep doing it every one of your turns if you want. And it does decent damage.
Interestingly enough, warlocks and warlocks have the special things called Eldritch Invocations, which lets you power up, and essentially you're given, skill points to put into specific categories for, like, let's say you wanted to have dark vision permanently. Bam, you can now see in the dark. Or maybe
That's
you
what dark
wanted to
vision
power
is
up
for
your
anyone who doesn't know.
maybe you wanted to power up your Eldritch Blast. Bam, you do extra damage. Maybe
There's one
you
of those
wanted to
invocations
have,
that makes your Eldritch Blast go like 200 more feet.
you double the range of your Eldritch Blast, or even
Yeah.
like triple the range. It's insane how
Mhm.
powerful warlocks can get. And
But you're bound to your entity. You can't act freely most of the time.
And-
It comes at a major price.
there's a specific difference between warlocks and sorcerers and wizards. Sorcerer and wizards have plenty of spell slots. They can cast a lot of these higher level spells more often than warlocks. Warlocks have less spell slots,
And they have access to more spells.
if you go to our second episode, spellcasting, you will learn more about spell slots and how spells are cast
Yes.
for what we're referencing here. But warlocks also have the unique ability of getting their spell slots back through a short rest, not a long rest. So you could take a nap and be fully charged and ready to go, whereas a sorcerer and a wizard need to take a full night's sleep to recharge their spell slots.
Mm-hmm.
And that is insanely powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Because with just the way D&D works, you could just sit down, take an hour, and then bam, you're ready to go.
Yeah.
What? You already have a super powerful cantrip that you can modify, and you get all your stuff back. You never need sleep. All you need is coffee and naps.
Yeah. You're the college student of D&D.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, all you need is like coffee.
It's just so much coffee.
Yeah. It's warlocks, if you have one in your party, get ready to just have combat revolve around if they have their spell slots up or not.
If they've taken a nap today.
Yeah. That's the college students. If only we had the power to shoot eldritch magic out of our hands.
Yeah, they're called papers.
What?
We spend all of our energy typing out papers and doing assignments, and then we
yeah.
take a nap and we're recharged for the next time.
Yeah, that's what we want to happen.
Oh, I'm sad now.
Talking about, speaking of nerds, let's talk about wizards.
Wizards are the
Wizards
nerdy
scholarly
college students.
magic- What?
They're the nerdy college students.
Yeah, wizards are a scholarly magic user capable of manipulating the structures of reality. When I was talking about rogues before, and arcane tricksters like a rogue and wizard combined. Wizard is probably the class you probably thought we start out with.
If you wanted to dip your toe into every type of magic and or every spell, with a few exceptions, wizards are the best utility caster.
What don't they
In
have
the
access to?
They don't have access to Eldritch Blast, Druidcraft, and
I
some.
think through 1 feat they could gain access to Eldritch Blast.
You could definitely. Wizards are just masters of the arcane. They spend all of their time studying and learning new spells.
All
They
of their
have
time.
They have the most spell slots out of anybody. They have the most cantrips, just baseline, out of anybody. They are so weak, it is dumb. Because if they get sneezed on,
Yeah.
they will just like fly away or be torn in half like a wet napkin.
They are incredibly fragile.
They are what's behind the barbarian.
Yeah. It's talk about polar opposites. Wizard and barbarian, amazing duo, but one of them will die without the other. I'm pretty sure you can guess who that is. Wizards are one of my favorite. I usually play fire mages in every RPG game that I play, but I have yet to play a wizard just because I wanted to experiment with what else D&D had to offer, since I always play like mages and wizards. Wizards are very, like, if you want to start out and basically be Gandalf or Dumbledore, or anybody from Harry Potter,
Mm-hmm.
play a wizard. And we should talk about in another episode multi-classing. 'Cause I bet you guys, if you're new to this, bet you didn't expect you could be any combination of these classes or more of them.
Wow.
Multi-classing, we might do a whole episode on that, just like multi-class. Here, I'll leave you with this, or we'll leave you with this just for before next time, before we decide what to do. There is a fabled character that only few D&D players dare create. That is a combination of every class.
Kids, don't try this at home.
Yeah, it's just a mess.
If you went to a breakfast buffet or any buffet for that, and you got a bowl and you took one piece of everything, dessert and soup included, and you just put it all in the same bowl and mashed it together, that's kind of what it would be.
Yeah, and then threw it at the wall and lit it on fire. That's what it is.
Because that's what you need to do with your character sheet.
Yeah, don't do that. Pick 2 at most, maybe 3 if you're skilled.
We're not condoning arson.
No, of course not.
No fire.
Unless it's D&D.
Unless it's D&D.
Burn down whatever you want in the game.
Unless you're a sorcerer.
Yeah, we. should we talk about him?
No, let's not talk about Kai Van Dorian.
Oh no, he said his name. He's coming.
Oh Lord, he coming.
Yeah, sorcerers, be careful with your magic. Druids, be careful with your animals. Barbarians, be careful with your hands. Bards, be careful with your instruments. Clerics, be careful with your gods. Same with paladins. Rangers, be careful with your bows. Rogues, be careful with your knives. Monks, be careful with your entire body. Fighters, be careful with your sword and shield. Warlocks, be careful with your deal with Satan. Wizards, you're fine. There are other classes, too, from other published content, such as the Artificer or Blood Hunter, but we didn't feel the need to include those as we were discussing just the base game of D&D. So, that's it for this episode.
Oh, man.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been episode 3 of Discussions and Dragons, hosted by yours truly, resident player character, and co-hosted by resident dungeon master. You can find this podcast on the Pirate Media 1 SoundCloud, and we hope you tune in for the next episode. Thank you for listening.
You're welcome.